Most founders think that the hard part is hiring great people. But then you finally find them and they're experienced and they're smart and whew, they are more than qualified for their job. And then you realize that you're still answering questions and mediating conflicts, and you're still making decisions and finding yourself surprised by their underperformance. So, what if the problem isn't that your team needs more managing? What if it's not about managing more, but about something that you're doing and you don't even realize it? So, today I'm going to share the three mistakes I see founders make over and over and what to do instead. So I was on a call the other day with one of my clients, and this is what he said to me. He said, I can't get to the big picture stuff, the creative direction, the community outreach, my marketing strategy, because I am so tied up cleaning up after my team members who are underperforming. He said, I don't want to micromanage them. I don't have time for that. Kara, what do I do? And maybe you felt that too. Maybe you found yourself thinking, what do I do? So I have good news today. I've got three things for you that's going to make a real difference. And I worked through them this week with this client, and they'll work for you just like they worked for him. So let's jump right into it. The first thing the founders get wrong is they don't define what good looks like. They don't clarify the difference between done and good. And you and your employee, you may be able to agree on what done is, but do you agree on what good looks like? Because that standard usually lives in your head or in the way that you used to do it before you handed this work off to someone else. And I know it feels weird to lay out what good looks like, especially to someone who you hired for a specific skill set, someone who's probably better at this than you are. But you have a what and a why. And if you don't communicate that in plain, objective ways, you will just be disappointed, my friend. And this is not micromanaging, it's setting a detailed expectation, which you have every right to do. I'm going to give you an analogy and then I'll give you a real life example. So, have you ever watched the TV show Is It Cake? It's a show where bakers compete to make these hyper realistic cakes. The cakes that look like all sorts of random objects, and it's hard to tell which one is the cake and which one is the object. So let's say that we're playing as a cake, and today's challenge is to make a cake that looks just like this microphone I'm talking into right now. And let's say I'm the judge. And I say, you have 5 hours to make a cake that looks just like this microphone. It needs to match in color and size and its markings. It says road right there and its texture. And I need to be able to move it up and down. Okay, ready, go. And off they'd go. Okay, so what did I tell them? What did I tell the bakers? I didn't tell them what ingredients to use, what order to make it in, what tools or techniques to use. I didn't even suggest a flavor that had to be inside. I was only explicit about what the microphone needed to look like. And that's exactly what they get evaluated on. So you have to define your microphone for your team. Okay, here's a real life example. I coach uh, a team of four entrepreneurs that together run a portfolio of Airbnb properties. They have 15 properties all across the United States, West Coast, East Coast. And they have this beautiful brand. It's built on hospitality, efficiency, excellence. When you go to one of their properties, you walk away feeling like you had an awesome experience that's super unique to their brand. So when you run Airbnbs, you need cleaners, right? And this team was finding that some of their properties kept getting these less than ideal cleaning reviews. And that was becoming a trend. It wasn't just once or twice, it was becoming a trend. So when I was working with them, I asked what expectations they'd laid out at the start. And they said, well, we're not going to micromanage them. We contracted them to do what they do, which is clean. So I asked, okay, if a cleaner did a good job, what would that look like? And they immediately rattled off, right? Like crisp, tight bedding, sparkly surfaces, all the things. He knew exactly what their standard of excellence was. And as he listed it out, he realized he's never actually communicated it. When we finished the call, I asked him, what are you going to do next? What's your takeaway? He said, define the microphone. So, what does your microphone look like? If your people are producing work that is not up to your standard, work that you want redone in a certain way, what does that way actually look like? So think about that. But here's what I want you to do, because I promised you a fix, not just an observation. So here's the fix. Don't don't do this retroactively. Okay. So don't go to your team and say, hey, I never really defined what good looks like. So let's go back and let's fix that. So don't do that. Just do it organically moving forward. So the next project or event or product that's starting, get clear on what you want the microphone to look like. Okay. Be specific. Use your values, your mission, your vision to explain why these standards actually matter. Then let your people do what they do best. So do this consistently, project after project, and your team will start to see it and they'll start to get it. And eventually it just becomes the way we do things around here. All right. Okay. Mistake number two. And this one's sneaky. Okay. So the second mistake I see founders make is they build roles around tasks instead of outcomes. So think about the last job description that you wrote or the last time you handed something off to someone on your team. Did you list out what you wanted them to do? Like post 3 times a week, answer the emails, keep the calendar updated? Or did you tell them what you wanted them to be responsible for? Okay, don't miss this. So, a list of tasks tells someone what to do today. It does not tell them what to care about or what to own. And when someone doesn't know what they're actually responsible for, they'll do exactly what you asked and nothing more. And it's not because they're lazy, it's because you never asked for anything more. And this is actually a huge mindset shift as much as it is a tactical one. Okay. When you hire for tasks, you are still operating as the manager. You're the one who has to notice the gaps. You have to assign the next task and check the box. But when you hire for outcomes, friend, you become something different. You become the person who defines what winning looks like, and you let your team figure out how to get there. And that is ownership. And it requires you, as hard as this is, to let go of being the person with all the answers about the how. Here's how I think about it, okay? Picture an oven versus a thermostat. So an oven does exactly what you said it to do. It does nothing more. Preheat it to 350, it holds at 350. Even if what's inside still isn't cooking, even if your meat is still not finished, it doesn't know that. It's not checking, okay? A thermostat is different. You give it a target. Keep this room at 72. And it constantly is reading the actual temperature. It's adjusting until it hits that number. It is self-correcting. So a task-based hire is an oven. Set them, they'll do exactly what you said, whether or not it's working. An outcome-based hire is a thermostat. You give them the outcome and they'll just adjust. They will problem solve on their own to get there. So what does this actually sound like? Okay, here are some examples. Let's say an executive assistant. Your task might be manage my calendar or book travel or answer my emails. But here is the outcome: protect my time. Isn't that so good? Protect my time. So I only spend it on decisions only I can make, right? My calendar needs to reflect my priorities and not just be full of things. Do you hear the difference? Okay, here's another one. A bookkeeper, a task is enter the transactions weekly. But here is an outcome. I need to always know exactly where the business stands financially so nothing surprises me at tax time. Whew, that outcome feels good. I want that outcome. And let's be honest, if you set the outcome and they still don't know what to do to get there, my friend, that's a different problem. That is not a clarity issue. That is a skills issue. And you did not hire them so you could take on a second job of babysitting and instructing all day. So I want to take a quick moment to really show you the distinction between these two first mistakes, these 2 points that I've made. And I'm going to use the is it cake example again because, your girl always has a good food analogy. So showing them what good looks like and giving the outcome, not the tasks, sounds like this. You have 2 hours to make a cake that looks like this microphone. Okay, this is exactly what it should look like. That's the definition of good. Also, I want you to fool every judge in this room. When I pick up this cake, I want gasps. When I cut into it, I want disbelief. But ultimately, I want your cake to win. Okay, that's the outcome. So the good is in the spec, what it needs to look like. The outcome is in the impact, why it needs to look that way at all. So notice how neither of those gives a step-by-step or tells them exactly how, just a good what and a great why.
So you might not know this, but I started my career as a public school elementary music teacher. I was Mrs. List, the music teacher. I went to school, got a music degree, jumped right into teaching in the classroom. And, I think school leaders do a really great job when it comes to explaining what good looks like and being explicit about the outcome. So, what good looked like in my classroom was a constantly active, bright and engaging atmosphere with lots of singing, lots of instrument playing, lots of movement, and a variety of activities. Okay. We never stopped moving from the moment they got in to the moment they left my room. We were active and engaged, moving from one thing to the next every 5 to 7 minutes. And the outcome was that the kids would not only learn about music, but more importantly, they'd learn to love music. And inside of that, I got to bring my unique self to that classroom and order my lesson plan and content to achieve good and achieve the outcome. So here's what I want you to do before your next hire, or honestly, just before your next conversation with someone who's already on your team. Write down the outcome first. Don't write down the tasks or the list of tasks. What is the impact you want this person's work to have? And the tasks come after as the how, not the what. And then in your one on ones, you can stop asking, did you get this done? Did you get that done? Give me a status update. Instead, you can start saying or asking, what were the challenges that you're facing? How can I help you remove hurdles so that you can reach your outcome? And this whole process, this is actually one of the exact things I work through with founders during VIP days. So you come spend a day with me virtually, or if you want the full experience, you fly out to beautiful Bend, Oregon, and we spend the day mapping your team members' outcomes, your culture, your values, how you communicate as a team. We handle specific team member challenges like underperformance. We do all of it. And you're here in person. We get to do all the amazing Central Oregon experiences while we chat, all the views, all the food, because I like this experience to not feel like this boring consulting session, but a retreat for you to leave with total clarity. But whether you do this work with me over dinner here in Bend, or you do it tonight with a notepad at your kitchen table, the exercise is the same. Get radically clear on the outcome you actually need from every role on your team. And when you do, my friend, watch what happens. The team members who were quietly checking boxes, they will either rise into ownership, or you'll finally see clearly that they were never going to. And either way, you'll know. Okay, third mistake, and if I'm honest, this might be the one that stings the most because it's less about your team, more about you. So the third mistake I see founders make is they ask for feedback way less than they give it. They ask for it less than giving it. And this one is easy to get trapped in because yes, it's your job to tell your team what needs to change or what to do differently. But how often are you asking them to address the same about you? And it's easy to let feedback fall into this pattern of moving only in one direction, down from you to them. But here's the problem. If feedback only ever moves one way, your team learns something really fast. Feedback is a thing that happens to them, not something that is just part of the culture, and definitely not something that they are actively a part of. Okay, I'm going to ask you a tough question. Do you feel the pressure to be the person who's always right? The person who always has to be the one evaluating? Or are you the kind of leader who can sit across from someone and say, tell me what's not working for you about me and how I lead? And can you say that and actually mean it? We all want the second half of that, but be honest with yourself just for a second and consider which one most accurately marks your leadership. You can't build a feedback culture by decree. You can't just say, my door is open. Feel free to give me feedback, and then expect to create safety because no one's going to walk through that door, I guarantee. And here's how I think about it. Feedback has to work like a window, okay? Not a one-way mirror. In a one-way mirror, you can see them, but they can never see you back. And that's what it feels like on a team where the founder only gives feedback and never asks for it. Your team feels watched and evaluated and studied, but they have no window into you. And over time, people stop trusting the mirror because it only ever points one direction. So a real feedback culture is a window. You can see them, they can see you. And when you show yourself first, when you ask and you receive it well, that's when people believe it's actually safe to be honest with you. So I'm working with a client right now, all the way over in Australia. She wakes up at 4:30 in the morning just to get on a call with me. It's just amazing commitment. Well, she built her annual performance review season around soliciting feedback first. So she started asking in her one-on-ones, what's something I could start doing or stop doing that would make working here with me easier and more enjoyable for you? And guess what? Her people answered.
They actually gave her feedback. Some of it surprised her, some of it stung a little, but she modeled what it looked like to want it and to receive it well. Then, when it came to do performance reviews, she had an employee say that it was the best he had ever felt in this process. And it wasn't because he got the easiest and exclusively positive feedback, it's because he was a part of the conversation and there was a trust that was built there. So here's what I want you to do: start asking. In your next one on one, ask one question: what's one thing I could do differently that would make your work easier? And then, this is the part that everyone skips: receive it. Receive it well. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to get defensive. You can say thank you. You can write it down. And you know what? You can even disagree, but you don't have to say that. Okay. You say thank you and you write it down. And if it's something you can actually act on, you come back later and you tell them that you changed because of what they said. And that's the loop. Okay. Ask, receive, act, follow up. You ask for it, you receive it, you do something, and then you follow up, okay? It's what actually builds trust. It is never going to be a one-time survey. It is never going to be an open door policy. It's going to be a loop that you repeat over and over again. And if you want a shortcut, trust me, you want a shortcut. I built a free leadership toolkit with the exact feedback framework and scripts that I use with all my clients. The questions to ask, how to give feedback and conduct the best one-on-ones, all of it. And good news to you, it's free. So you can go grab it at heycaralist.com/toolkit. Friends, so there you have it. Okay, 3 mistakes I see founders make over and over: never defining what good looks like, building rules around tasks instead of outcomes, and giving feedback way more than asking for it. Okay, fix even one of these, and you will feel the shift in your team almost immediately. I mean, fix all 3, and you just won't have a team that executes, you'll have a team that owns it. Really, you'll have a team that allows you to do what you hired them to do in the first place. Think high level, take your brand to the next level, and all of the other things that only you can do. So does that sound good? Is that what you want? I think it is. So before we go, I want to remind you, you will always find a reason for why these fixes won't work for you or your team. Okay? These are proven. I have used these with my clients. When we find clarity, when we have this moment, if you're listening right now and you're like, okay, I have the momentum, I want to make a change, I'm feeling really good. When you have those moments and you're ready to make a change in your leadership, it is almost always, my friend, followed by inner conflict and doubt. So right now, commit to the one thing you're going to fix and move forward with confidence. Confidence that you are the leader your team needs. And together, you and your team, you will do great things. So don't forget to grab that free toolkit, grab it today, and remember, I'm cheering you on, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.